Welcome back to the All About Us podcast, where we deep dive into the stories and remarkable who are making a difference in our communities. I'm your host, Carl Allen, and today I'm absolutely thrilled to have with us someone whose work and dedication truly embodies what it means to be a force for positive change. Our guest today is Kimberley Robinson Alexander, the founder of B-inpowerD brand and a passionate advocate for the Black and Brown community. With over 3 decades of motherhood behind her and a rich background in human services, Kimberley brings a unique perspective to her advocacy work. Her personal journey and unwavering commitment to her life's motto, "Didn't birth babies to bury them," drives everything she does. She's not just talking about change, she's actively creating it, making her a tremendous leader in the fight for a more inclusive future. Kimberley, it's such an honor to have you here with us today. How are you doing?
I'm great, Carl. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Kimberley, welcome to the All About Us podcast. Let's start with your story. Can you tell us what initially sparked your passion for advocating within the Black and Brown community?
I don't know. It was natural. I don't know that there was like this one thing. I've always been a huge advocate amongst my family. I've always been a huge advocate just in general. But I can remember the first time, I actually was just talking about this today. I grew up in New York and I lived in the Bronx, and I lived 2 blocks from where Amadou Diallo was shot. And I lived on the same block that Malcolm Ferguson was killed by the police. And so that was actually the first time I stepped outside of my doors and joined individuals in the street who were upset about the things that were happening within our community.
Now, what year was that and how old were you when that occurred?
I think I was probably 18 when that occurred.
Okay.
So we're talking now back to 1996.
Wow.
Yeah. I think it was 1996. And I remember, Al Sharpton entering my community and all of the other people who were coming out to talk about what had happened to Amadou Diallo. And it was just a short time after that, just a couple of blocks away, that Malcolm Ferguson was then killed in the vestibule of his building, and my entire community was in an uproar.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Now, we spoke just before we started the show, and I found out you had lived in my hometown of Reading, Pennsylvania for 8 years. How exactly did you go from New York City to Reading, Pennsylvania? What kind of motivated that move?
It was, I can't take any credit for it. It was my ex-husband who wanted to leave New York City. And my god sister was living in Reading at the time, and I wanted to be someplace where I knew someone, and so that's how I ended up there.
And who is your god sister?
Her name is Tavia. She's not from there either. She's from Harlem too.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And do you consider moving to Reading, Pennsylvania at that time? Was that a positive move for you and your family?
It was definitely a positive move. It was a positive move for a lot of reasons. It was where I moved away from a situation that wasn't the best. I was in a domestic violence relationship
Okay.
at the time, and ultimately my ex-husband ended up not moving with me. So it was kind of where I gained my independence
Okay.
over the next few years from that situation. But it also drove a lot of who I am now. I know that's your hometown, but for me, Reading was the first time that I met the impoverished mind in the way that I did.
Yeah.
The culture of Reading, the demographic of Reading, the go with the flow of Reading was it was really eye-opening for me, because I had always been the person, and I was 27. I was still really, really young.
Okay.
And I was the person who kind of questioned things. Like, I didn't come from an environment where if I accepted no, I got what it was that I needed, right? That was
Right.
kind of a natural pusher in me. And so when I got to Reading and I started being told no for just basic things, and realized that I lived in a community that didn't buck up against the system, that they got to do what it was that they wanted to do. And, such a large Hispanic community, such a large monolingual community, lots of families who were dependent on their children for translation. So parents were disempowered in a way that I didn't understand.
Correct.
I didn't understand this idea that the children that I birthed and brought into this world, the authority I had in their life was being taken away from me by a system that just said because I said so. No, it was in Reading that the first time I spoke before a school board was in Reading. The first time I sued a school board was in Reading. The first time I advocated for a different, for other people as it related to educational advocacy and fairness in education was in Reading. So there were a lot of things that I grew into being in that environment. So it was definitely a good experience. It grew me up somewhat, but it was I knew it wasn't the place that I was going to settle.
Well, yeah, and see, a lot of people don't realize that. I left Reading when I was 17, and so the thing is, it is a very restrictive, controlled, and inspired socially, economically, and politically. And a lot of individuals don't realize that because they live their entire life there, and that's all they know. That's all they know. That's all they're familiar with. You mentioned that your 31 years of motherhood have been a driving force in your work. How has being a mother shaped your perspective on advocacy and community building?
So, community is what I leave my children, right? So community is not just the neighborhood that I live in, but it is also the people who become aunties and uncles, it's the friends and the cousins that they have by extension of who I've brought into my life. But I have 2 sons and I have 2 daughters, and all of us are brown, right? Like,
Okay.
we're all brown. And so having experienced what it looks like to have your light dimmed by the people around you, by the systemic racism, by the overt and covert, micro and macro aggressions that exist in the world that we grow up in, what it looks like to hear that your child can't, or they won't, or they don't have the privilege of, or to just watch them be treated different than other children, their white counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
It changed who I wanted them to see themselves as.
Okay.
And they have a right to be. They have a right to be just who they are. They have a right to be fallible. They have a right to error. They have a right to grace and all of the things that come with ages and stages of life. And far too often we're kids who are experiencing life in communities that don't appreciate them are dismantled by how stringent and strict that community is. And as a mother, I've had to talk, right? Like I've had to talk with all of my children, my boys especially, and to have to change the dynamics of my household where I am creating trauma in my own four walls for the children that I work to protect them from the outside.
Understand. So I'm going to open this thing up and start talking about your personal journey inspiration. Your life quote, "I didn't birth babies to bury them," is incredibly powerful. Can you share the story behind the quote and what it means to you personally?
So the quote really just came out of this idea that I never wanted to be a mother of the movement. You know, the mothers of the movement, Gwen Carr and Sabrina Fulton, and those moms who have buried their children, not because they were sick, not because, they, God forbid, had a car accident, but they buried their children because someone didn't have the emotional intelligence not to kill them. Because someone who has the ability to take life and liberty in 2 seconds, right, did not have the emotional intelligence, the proper training, and the understanding that that was a life on the other end of their bullet. And so I have worked in advocacy for the most part, pretty much almost full time for the last 9 years. And so during that time, I've sat with these women. I've sat with these mothers. I've gone to, funerals. I have seen the collateral damage that is the children of these men, the children of women, the brides, the spouses, and then the extended family. And no parent, no loved one should have to go through that. And so for me, I didn't birth babies to bury them. It was exactly that. I did not bring 4 children into this world to bury them.
And which environment did that come out of? Where were you living at the time that, this quote took over kind of your whole direction and the deaths and the mothers burying their sons? Where did all this take place in?
In Houston. I'm in Houston now.
Okay, so that took place in Houston. Okay, I see. Now, what were some of the pivotal moments of experiences that led to transition from personal advocacy to founding the B-inpowerD brand?
So B-inpowerD really was given to me. It is something that's kind of been marinating inside of me for a long time. I've worked, like I stated, in the nonprofit arena for a while now, and I was working under someone else's brand. Mm-hmm. But, all of the things that lived in me then live in me now. And as I transitioned from that role, I was looking for a place to put those things. What would that look like? And I literally was having a conversation with my fellowship cohort and just saying, I don't know what my next step is. I don't know what the next thing I'm going to do is. And that's what I went to sleep on. And I woke up and I saw B-inpowerD. And literally at that moment, immediately applied for my LLC. Shortly thereafter, trademarked I didn't birth berries to bury them and B-inpowerD, and have been working on that brand ever since then. So it really just comes out of, at the core of everything I want people to hear from me and to see and to get from my story is that you have the power. So be in your power.
You have a rich background in human services. How did those early experiences prepare you for the work that you're doing now?
I think that everything that I've experienced prepared me. I started out, I was 22 years old, my first real job working for an organization, New York. Back then it was AHRC in New York City, and I was working with those who had disabilities. And that was kind of like my entry point of taking the personal, caring, take care of people person and have it face outwardly in employment.
Okay.
And it grew from there. I have worked in everything from juvenile detention to adult detention to group home and in all kinds of different environments. It allowed me to see both sides of the coin, right? It allows me to see the inner workings of adult and juvenile detention facilities. It allowed me to see privatized prisons. It allowed me to see how the foster care system and group homes work. It allowed me to really have an understanding of what people in different situations go through. And it increased my knowledge base in addition to my personal experiences with the experiences that I have professionally, which kind of, I fit in every room.
Okay. Now, tell us about that B-inpowerD. That name is kind of different. So I want to know, break it down, the B, the empowered, and the D. What does all that mean? What does that brand represent? And what was your vision when you founded it?
So it's just be empowered. The D is not separate. Just think of the word empowered. So
I see.
Yeah, so it's be empowered. And yes. And it really means to be in your power. Literally. Be whatever your power is. Carl, your power is getting people's stories out there, giving people a platform to talk about themselves. My power is motivating people, teaching self-care, sharing my testimony so people understand that, they too can do it, helping to heal people as a nurse that, over the last 15 years. So that's my power. But I believe that all of us have power in us, and we have waited a long time to be given permission to kind of stand in that power. And I'm saying, be in your power, whatever that is, be there, be in that power. And Be Empowered is here to help you realize that power, stand in that power, and for you to lose all, inhibitions that say you have to get permission to do that.
And how do you help individuals in marginalized communities hone in and discover their own power?
Like that, it's knowledge. It is helping people understand how to navigate systems, whether that's healthcare, school, judicial systems. It's helping people understand who you go to, who you talk to. If you get a no, who do you pivot to? How those individual systems work. For instance, here in Texas, the educational system is very different than it was in Reading, Pennsylvania. And Reading, Pennsylvania is very different than what it was when I lived in New York City. But knowing who to go to, who to talk to, where you go if you're getting a no, when you can talk before the school board, when you can talk before the city council, who represents you and how you find that out. Learning how to navigate the systems that have historically oppressed us is one of the very first things needed to really feel like you have the power to control your life.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot. Okay. What are some of the core programs or initiatives that the Be Empowered focuses on?
Advocacy, education around mental health services, mental health awareness, destigmatizing, getting help, getting out and talking about your anxiety, your depression, your suicidal ideation, understanding what those things are and what they mean. Educational advocacy, talking about individuals who are exceptional, whether they are in gifted programs and not being challenged because, schools don't know what to do with them, or they have some sort of deficit that they're working through, making sure that they're receiving the supports that they need, that they have an adequate individual education program, an IEP, or they have a 504. Just knowing what it is that you are entitled to under the laws of the areas that you live in. Judicial systems, knowing who to talk to when you're in situations where there's error. We all make mistakes. And sometimes our children and our loved ones, they make mistakes, but it doesn't mean that we bury them under the jail because of it. So just understanding the resources that you have around you. I run a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot of educational promoting through the podcast, making sure people understand that. There's a lot of educational information on my website so that people have free access to that. I truly believe in partnerships, things that partnerships rule the world. We have a mentality in this world because we've been taught to have one that there's not enough. And there is enough. There is enough for all of us. And there is enough for all of us to band together with our own unique set of skills. And you know, I don't know, did you ever watch Voltron? You know,
Yeah, that's one of my favorite programs.
it was one of my favorite cartoons too. You know, I might be the leg and you might be the arm. You know, so close as the torso. If we
You're right.
go to that mentality. You mentioned earlier community. That's what community is. I don't have to know it all. I don't have to have it all. I don't have to do it all. I can stay in my niche and I can now go to you and say, Carl, I know you have an expertise in this. Let's get together. Let's build our robot and let's do this thing.
Exactly. Community impact and facing challenges, that's difficult for many people. In your work with marginalized communities, what are some of the biggest challenges you've encountered and how have you worked to overcome them?
Trust. I think trust is naturally a concern for most people. You know, letting people in. We can't ignore the fact that we have been fighting an uphill battle of who can we trust, even within our own communities, right? Who are the people who I can tell my deepest, darkest secrets to? Who can I be most vulnerable with? Who can I tell I'm having a problem staying housed or my kids are hungry without CPS or, you know, Child Protective Services knocking on my door? Who can I be that vulnerable with? And how do I overcome that? I know what it is to be unhoused. I know what it is to be hungry. I know what it is to live in those situations. When you come to a situation authentically, when you say, I don't know, when you really don't know, and you help, when you don't televise that or Facebookvise that, you know, when you don't take someone's worst moment and make it a spectacle and everybody else's business, when you move quietly, I don't need to be famous. I don't need to have my name and my face on billboards. I don't need to, you know, I want to authentically, first of all, show up as myself, right? I want to do that. And then I want to authentically help in whatever way I can that I have the ability to do so. And I want to partner with community organizations nationally, worldwide, that are doing the work authentically too and make it happen.
Well, I have a nonprofit and we're going to talk a bit because my nonprofit is called Stand Up and Do Something. And so we're definitely going to talk and we're definitely going to network. I have a 501c3, but also my nonprofits are federal contractors also. So there's a lot for us to talk about and share in the future. Can you share a specific story or example of how your work has made a tangible difference in someone's life or the communities you've been a part of?
You know, I can talk a lot about situations, especially in educational advocacy.
Okay. That's your big thing?
You know, having 4 children who were all exceptional.
Okay.
I got into educational advocacy originally because I had to fight, right? I learned all of this stuff because as a single mom in Reading, Pennsylvania, I had to fight for my children. And so now being able to sit in on IEP meetings and help individuals talk through suspensions of someone, you know, who's exceptional, who has an IEP, having gained all of that knowledge, you really see the weight lifted sometimes by just having somebody on your side there. I've sat in IEP meetings where it's me and 16 people from the board, you know, and they do it on purpose. It's intimidating, right? They don't want you to speak up. So there are times where I'm there and the parent just has somebody to hold their hand under the table. That in and of itself relieves anxiety. It's empowering. Sending a care package to someone who's lost their child, you know, just I'm thinking of you.
Right.
So there are a lot of different situations where I have impacted individual lives. And from a community standpoint, knowing that there is somebody out there that has you 10 toes down, that your children have an auntie out there, whether they know my name or not, or they do.
Already.
To know that there are people out there who are genuinely advocating for your right to be is empowering. And when you find that person, when you find those people, when you find your community, your tribe, there's no stopping you. And, empowerment to me, and it's empowerment to the people who I work with.
What misconceptions do you think people have about advocacy work in Black and Brown communities?
From a personal perspective, I would say it is the angry Black woman.
Mm.
Many of us are mothers. There's our fair share of men out there advocating for us also, but the circle that I live in, many of us are mothers. And so it's the idea that being loud and proud and outspoken for our children makes us angry Black women. Or me saying I didn't birth babies to bury them means that I'm angry. Or, one of the other things that I say often is I'll do hell in jail for mine. And it's true. I will, and so just being able to truly see that I'm standing here, I'm sitting here because of the love, the compassion, and the desire I have to not just see my children live, but to see my children thrive. They deserve joy and happiness and employment and family uninhibited by our systems, by our society, by police officers, by any other law enforcement entity. They deserve all of it.
Many times our culture has a lack of vision and an inability to plan for the future. You've been described as epitomizing the values needed to see meaningful shift within marginalized communities. What do you think needs to happen for us as a culture and our communities to have real lasting change?
So first of all, I think that's the lie that they tell us. I don't think that Black and Brown communities lack initiative or vision or desire. I think that is by design.
Mm-hmm.
Spaces have been created to give us our way of thinking. We can go back to the environment in Reading, right? If you don't expose me to anything, then what am I seeking? If there is no enrichment, if there's no after school, if there is no sports, if there are no art programs, if there are no real museums, if there are no outings, if these things don't exist in our environment, what am I seeking? So I don't think it's a lack of vision. I think that we as Black and Brown people are the most creative people out there. We make something out of nothing.
Very true.
We have been handed down. We have the recipes to prove it. We have the homes to prove it. We have the innovations to prove it. We have the inventions to prove it. There is nothing lacking in our community. What's lacking are the supplemental programs and resources that our communities need in order to thrive, in order to have options out there. And I think that the younger generation is getting hip to that. I think that the younger generations that came behind us are truly getting hip to that. They're having less children. They're putting careers first. They are killing it in our, college graduation rates, and the industries that they're going into. I think that it's a fallacy to say that we are not achieving.
So you do see some success already, and you do see some positive change in many areas. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's good.
I want those successes, and I want those changes to happen without us having to sacrifice something. So while I believe that the generations that come behind me are achieving more, they're putting their careers first, they shouldn't have to do that at the expense of, do I have children or do I not have children?
Okay.
Because of the culture that we live in. You know, I know parents, younger parents, or people who are of parenting age who are choosing not to have children out of fear because of where we sit right now.
Correct.
You know, so if I make a choice to go into this career or that career or have children or not have children, it should not be because of what this environment does to me because of my skin color. It should just be my choice.
Correct. Where do you see B-inpowerD in the next 5 years? What are your biggest goals, dreams, and desires for the organization?
I would say first and foremost, brick and mortar. You know, I would love to have a space that is dedicated to not just the work that the organization does, but as a space that is a safe haven for the community, a place that if you need a pantry, a full pantry is there. If you are going on your first interview and you need a suit and a woman, it's there. If you need just, you know, a safe space, a meal, you can come and get that. You just want to shoot some pool, there's a game room in the back. You know, I can see it as we're talking. I can see the colors in vibrant, bright colors, welcoming colors, and just all of the things that are real to our communities. You know, I grew up borrowing a cup of sugar from my neighbor.
Okay.
Like, let me be your neighbor. Let me come borrow a cup of sugar from me. You know, come get a book to read because you've read all of the ones in your house. Come practice your letters with me. You know, come find someone to tutor you on the subject that you're weak in. I envision brick and mortar, several stories of this welcoming place that our communities can come into and get whatever it is that they need, and then multiply that around this world.
Well, let's work together on that. I think that's something we can work together on. I'm moving a lot of what I'm doing to Puerto Rico to help in that community there. But we definitely have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
I want to.
That's my background. My mom is Puerto Rican and my father Romanian. So,
Wow.
so you're talking my language now, and I speak. So let's go. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, we're definitely going to do it then. I'm relocating to Puerto Rico this year. So I'm going to Humacao.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that part. My family.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Humacao is kind of like about 45 minutes southeast of San Juan. So it's on the east side of the island. Where's your family from?
Primarily Mayagüez. So
Okay.
other side, inland.
Okay.
But family in Aguadilla, Ponce, San Sebastián, several areas in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, and Ponce is one of the areas that we're going to be pushing strong focus. They had Hurricane Maria, but then there was an earthquake in Ponce. So there's a lot of, damaged homes still in that area. So that's a lot of the work that we're going to be doing. So, we're definitely going to need to talk. So after 31 years of motherhood and your extensive advocacy work, what wisdom would you share with other parents who want to make a difference in their communities?
Let's say, first of all, start at home. My parenting journey was not seamless at all.
Okay.
I was 16 when I had my first child.
Okay.
I was still a baby myself. And so I would say start at home.
Okay.
I've had to repair. I still have to repair as I've grown up with my children.
Okay.
So, I think it is discovering who your kiddos are. And then as an extension of that, you begin to discover who the community is. Every community is different. Every community needs something different. This is not cookie cutter. There is no kit for this. What this community I'm in now needs versus what my Harlem community needed and what Reading needed. It's all different.
Okay.
So I think you have to learn the heartbeat of the community.
Correct.
And Go in with an open mind. Know that every day I learn something new every single day.
Me too.
Every day.
Me too.
And so, I take pride in being a lifelong learner. I take pride in not knowing everything, having to ask questions. So going in without the fix it mentality, without tunnel vision, that doesn't allow you to see every space and place and facet of a community, right? And going knowing your own biases.
Okay.
What we all have our belief systems. We all have those things that are core to us. Know who you are before you start messing with other people. If you don't know who you are and you go out there, you don't want to damage things that already exist or make situations that are out there worse. So have a healthy understanding of who you are. Have a healthy understanding of who the community is. Bring to the community what they need, not what you want to bring. I'll give you an example. I lived here during Hurricane Harvey.
Okay.
We needed a lot of different things. There were a lot of things that we need. But we didn't need blankets and clothes. And everybody wanted to give us blankets and clothes. If you're unhoused, you don't have any place to put them. If you only have the backpack on your back, you don't have any place to put a comforter and a pillow. And so that's kind of what I mean by understand what the community around you needs.
Okay.
And then be authentic.
Yeah.
Be authentic. People who need stuff know if you're coming for show or to show up. And if you're coming to show up, it looks different. I don't need to have my phone out. I'm not taking anybody's picture. I don't need to shake your hand in front of a camera. I say that, Carl, in the industry that we're in, people want to see what you're doing in the community. They want to show things. There's ways to do that. That's tactful.
Right.
That's televising somebody's worst day in the world.
Correct.
And so that's what I would say. Like, get to know yourself, get to know your household, get to know the community, what it needs, and then move with the compassion that community deserves. Not what you want, not what they, like the compassion that community deserves. The true definition of what community is.
Okay. What keeps you motivated during the difficult days when progress seems to be slow?
It keeps happening. Somebody keeps getting hurt. Somebody else dies. Tomorrow makes 5 years since George Floyd was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps happening. I still got babies. My kids are now 31, 26, 24, and almost 19 years old. But they're still mine. I still have babies. I still birth them.
Correct.
And I never want to bury them.
Correct. How do you take care of yourself while doing all of this emotionally demanding and draining work? You're a nurse, then, you're an advocate with your own nonprofit. How do you keep giving and giving and giving to everyone else, but then filling yourself and fulfilling yourself?
First of all, I go to therapy every week.
Wow.
I am a huge proponent of therapy, and therapy does not have to look like you sitting or laying on a couch with a therapist, but that could be somebody who's trusted in your community, someone who's going to give you sound advice. Whatever therapy looks like for you, get it. That's first and foremost. I go to the movies a lot by myself, but Carl, the truth is I've never found a plane I didn't like.
Okay.
Flown by whatever company. To whatever country or state that it goes to. I am a travel junkie.
Okay. That's good to hear. Okay. Well, this is the part of the show we call Flip Mode, where you get to ask me 3 questions and I have to answer. So hit me with your first question.
Growing up in Reading, Pennsylvania, we've already talked about some of the limitations that exist there. How did you find your way out, and what was the catalyst to you going?
Wow. My mother, I would have to say my mother, and just knowing that me seeing everybody just doing the same thing, just hanging out. It was either, you hung out or you were an athlete. And I kind of like wasn't either. And I was intellectually gifted. And so the big thing was for me was I wanted to get out, but I didn't know how to get out. And so it was the military was a motivating force for me because my mom basically told me, well, when you get 18, you're going to have to leave and you need to have your own place. And she said, but I'm not going to kick you out. But if you're at 18, once you turn 18 and you're living here at home with me, I'm going to charge you enough rent that you could be paying for your own place. And you're still going to be living and abiding by my rules as a child. So you might as well leave. I didn't wait till I was 18. I was gone at 17. So my mother was kind of that motivating factor. My mother was rough on boys. She, kind of coddled girls, but she was rough on boys. And you have to be a man and you have to make some decisions and you have to make some positive movement. And I just knew at that time, my future wasn't there and ready.
So I heard you say that your mom was rough on boys and kind of coddled girls. That is a story we hear a lot, especially in the Black community. I tried not to do that as a parent because I feel like boys deserve just as much coddling as girls do. Mm-hmm. How do you think young Black and brown men are adultified in today's society? And how do you think it hinders how they navigate the world?
What do you mean by adultified? Let me get it.
Just treated older than they should be. Treated as men of the household rather than a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old who is still learning and growing.
I mean, I may have a different perspective on this. From what I see, the first problem is a lot of our young men don't grow up in a true functional family, mother, father. And so they're growing up in broken homes. And that dynamic is very much different because you don't see the interaction between a man and a woman. You don't see how they come together and make things happen. You don't see that whole process of resolving problems and issues. In a functional home, you don't see how a wife treats and does her husband. You don't see how a husband treats, protects, and works with a wife. So, many boys are working at a deficit because they don't have that image of a man in the house. In addition, I don't know if they're really besides word. And what I mean by that is they say, oh, well, you're the man of the house. Well, it's hard to be the man of the house if you're being babied and coddled also. And I see more so, I grew up with a mother who really didn't do much for me. I mean, when I was 11 years old, I started going to the golf course caddying. And, carrying 2 golf bags at the Berkshire Country Club. And so I was making a lot of money. In fact, I'm not going to go into the story, but my parents took some of my money and held it hostage till we had a family meeting. I had so much money. I was buying my own clothes and everything else. A lot of what I actually see is they tell them that they're the man, but they create a codependent relationship. Whereas they tell them they're the man, but as soon as something happens or as soon as they get in trouble, the mother or the grandmother's running there to save them. So they never really, that there are consequences to bad decisions, bad actions until it's too late. So
another podcast.
It is. But so I believe they're adultified just in name only. They're not nourished in the responsibilities. One of the things I tell my sons, and my sons will tell you, I say it constantly, it's very easy to mess up a perfectly good life. I tell my sons that all the time. I tell my sons that each and every week is very easy to mess up a perfectly good life. It's not like it was when I was young. You do one thing and sometimes they'll send you into the military and totally wipe your record clean. You had a baby, you moved to another city. You can forget about the girl, forget about the child. All these systems are plugged in now. And you make one mistake, it affects everything else. It affects everything else. Your credit affects this. Your ability to get a driver's license affects that. You can't get a passport now. So many things that one wrong decision can affect. And so, that's what I think is lacking and missing. There are consequences for every bad action or every bad decision you make.
I think there are natural consequences to every decision that you make.
Yeah.
And I think that there are many of those natural consequences that we, both men and women, girl and boy, do and should live with. I think that some of the consequences that exist in our community only exist for us.
That's true.
And that's my fundamental issue with it. But that's also the dichotomy between mother and father. And so I believe that exists as well. So I have one more question. I'm assuming that you went to the military, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I am not a proponent of the military. My children know that. But if that was a decision that they made, that would be, the decision I would have had to have lived with. How do you think the military shaped who you are now? And would you have done it again, knowing what you know now?
I would definitely do it again. For me, I wouldn't recommend the military to a lot of people in our community. The number one reason why is, even though they don't like to admit it, there's systemic racism in the military. And you are you're talking about being trapped in a community. You're trapped in a box where you literally can't get away from it. You just have to deal with it. So it takes a whole lot of internal fortitude. It takes a lot of internal fortitude. It takes a lot of discipline to listen to the rhetoric and follow the guidelines, even though you are being judged harsher and it really isn't equal, even though that's the game and the story they play. Now, the racism, I will say, isn't versus your comrades, people that are under you in rank or people that are above you in rank. The racism comes in your officers and the high level enlisted personnel, the people who really control everything. That's where the systemic racism is. With the soldiers or the Marines or the guys you're working with in the Navy, you don't really see the racism at that level. But it's at the command level in the military where the racism is quite apparent, and it can be difficult. It can be difficult to deal with, and it can be difficult to overcome. They wanted my younger son, Alex. I'm a single parent. I have two sons, a 20-year-old who's in college. He wanted to go in the Marine Corps. I told him no. I said, you can't even get in the Marine Corps. He kind of messed up in college, and so now he's leaving for, I believe, his Army boot camp, June 15th. My younger son, I put him in electrical trades program, and he graduated from high school last year, and he's getting ready to begin his apprenticeship. But the Marine Corps recruiters, your dad was a Marine Corps, your dad, went to SEAL school and all this stuff. Why don't you? I said, my son Alex doesn't have the discipline. Alex would go in the military, and I said he'll get discharged. You have to know you'll get a dishonorable discharge. Alex, he's kind of like on the autism spectrum. He has oppositional defiance disorder. So I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like he debates and he argues with concerning everything. You take one position, he's going to take the other position and give you kind of some, weird rationalizations for his mental process and why he feels the way he does. And so instinctively, you have to know your children. You have to know what is and what isn't good for them. I didn't want any of my sons to go into the military. But Dante, he's chosen to go into the military, so now he'll see what he makes out of it. It was a great thing for me, but my children aren't built like me.
I would challenge you saying that the racism is in the ranks and not the file. And the only reason why I say that is because those who are ranked were once the file, right? So that's to demonstrate the power again to me.
I've been with the, once again, I can understand someone having that opinion. Let me give a clarification. They don't allow racism in the file. So if you are caught, like if we're both corporals and a white corporal is caught calling a black corporal a nigger, they're in trouble. So they squash that at the file level. But what happens is with the officers and the senior enlisted, you'll come in and they'll chastise you. And once you walk out, the officers or the staff and COs there, if they're white, if there's no one, minority origins in the room, then something like that might slip out. And so it's, how can I say it? The wool kind of gets pulled as you move higher up. They suppress it with the file, but it starts, showing itself behind closed doors as it goes up in rank. So it's there. There's no doubt. Okay, well, I hope I answered your questions.
You did. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up. Today's episode on the All About Us podcast was really inspiring for me because I came to find out that Kimberley lived in my hometown. She has an inspiring story, and it's inspired me. Her dedication to empowering marginalized communities and her unwavering commitment to making sure everyone has a voice is truly remarkable. If you want to learn more about Kimberley's work or connect with the B-inpowerD brand, we will have all the links in our show notes and on our promos that will be online. Remember, change starts with each of us taking action in our community. Thank you for tuning into the All About Us podcast today. If today's conversation moved you, please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our inspiring conversations. I'm Carl Allen. Until the next time, keep celebrating the stories that make us who we are. Take care, everyone.